Hi, everyone. I'm Gigi Howard. I am a librarian and host of the podcast Drinks in the Library, where every week I interview a guest about their favorite book and we pair it with a drink. I thank you so much for joining us today. We are wrapping up day 2 of Every Library Banned Books Week Live Festival, and I hope you've been enjoying it as much as I have. This event is a powerful opportunity to engage in the important conversations about reading, libraries, censorship, and the sheer joy of storytelling. There's 2 important conversations we want to have during the festival. First is, what are we doing to directly combat censorship and book bans? As the only national political action committee for libraries, every library is working tirelessly to safeguard libraries, support ballot measures, and address campaigns of erasure. Every library is proud to be partnering with Authors Against Book Bans to bring the wonderful panel that I'll be introducing momentarily. But the second conversation we need to have is that we need your help. Whether you're concerned about unconstitutional censorship or the attacks of marginalized populations, there are tangible ways for you to get involved today. Visit fightforthefirst.org, and we're here to connect you with ways to take action to defend access to books and stories that matter. So, speaking of meaningful conversations, I am thrilled to introduce today's session on the joy and depth of reading and writing. And we are joined by 3 wonderful panelists who are going to be diving deep into the topics that define Banned Books Week. So first, I was speaking with Shana Youngdahl. She is a poet, professor, and fiction writer. Shana's she loves helping people embrace stories they need to tell. She teaches at Lindenwood University's MFA program in writing, and her debut novel, As Many Nows as I Can Get, was a Kirkus Best Book of 2019, a 2020 Rise title from the ALA and New York Public Library's Top 10 Books for Teens. This is her second book, and it is called A Catalog of Burnt Objects, and it will be coming out March 2025. Thank you, Shana. All right, next up is Michael Leali. He is an author and educator born and raised in the Chicago suburbs and currently living in the San Francisco Bay Area. He holds an MFA in writing for children and young adults from the Vermont College of Fine Arts. When he isn't writing, he enjoys reading, playing board games, and a nice long walk. And his latest book, The Truth About Triangles, came out in May of this year. All right, last but not least, Marc Tyler Nobleman's book, Bill, the Boy Wonder, the secret co-creator of Batman, is the first published biography of Bill Finger, and the initially anonymous co-creator and original writer of Batman. It is the basis of the Hulu documentary Batman and Bill, which chronicles Nobleman's 9-year campaign to get Finger's name added to the official Batman credit line. Very cool. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Also, thank you to Authors Against Book Bans for bringing us all together. And now I get to ask you some questions. That's exciting. Shana, I'm going to start with you. And when did you decide when did you realize that you really wanted to be a writer?
Probably for real when I was about 12, although my mom wrote historical nonfiction and she had a writers group at the house all the time. And she had gotten a grant when I was about 5 years old to write histories of women who worked in World War II. So she was all about writing women back into history. And so she took me with her on a lot of her research trips. And then I also sat and witnessed them writing, and I saw her sending out her manuscripts, which one did in the mail in those days. And then she would get them back with rejections. And she's just sort of modeled for me that, if this is something you're going to do, it's hard work. And I listened. I was like, that's great. I want to do that too. And so sometime in middle school, it was sort of the thing that kept me going. And then it's continued to be the thing that keeps me going.
Thank you. Michael, what about you? When did you get into this game?
I've loved telling stories for as long as I can remember. I have a vivid memory, though, of being in first grade and sitting in the gymnasium for an author visit. And it was Debbie Dady, one of the writers of the Adventures of the Bailey School Kids chapter book series. And I'd never heard of her. I had not read any of her books when she came to speak. But as soon as she started talking about her process and told us the title of the first book in the series, Vampires Don't Wear Polka Dots, it was like fireworks went off in my brain. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. You have to have a title like that. You can become a writer, you can tell a story. So I ran home that afternoon and I wrote my first full book. And my mom is an educator at heart and quickly said, well, we're going to revise it and you're going to illustrate it. And she bought me this great hardcover book. And so I have this artifact from my childhood that is the first story I was really proud of. And that just has not stopped. And I have been writing stories ever since.
Wow, very cool. Oh, Marc, what's your writing experience been like? Oh, I think you're muted.
As if this is my first Zoom. So it's easy to discover your passion for writing when you're completely untalented at team sports. I just didn't play sports, so I had a lot of time to figure out where I really fit in. And as Shana said to me, my mom was instrumental in this. I loved drawing first, but I liked writing on the side. And my mom was the one who said, I don't want to talk you out of drawing more, but I think you might want to also write more. And so I listened. I was still at that age when you listen. It was, tween, I guess. And same as the other two ever since. I mean, in high school, I wrote short stories and would force my friends to read them and even comment at the back. I'm not saying I invented internet comment sections, but I was doing that in the 80s on paper. And then in college, I wrote a play. And in college, if you write a play, you can basically produce it for almost nothing. I mean, you've got free labor and you've got a stage that you can rent, or not rent, but, reserve. So I just, every step of the way, I was taking advantage in whatever way I could to write and to share that writing.
And so now you've all had, years of experience with writing. It's your love, it's your passion. The reason we're coming together tonight is to talk about censorship within our community. And you all made the decision to join Authors Against Book Bans really early on. And I would love to hear more about, your coming to this and your process. So, Marc, how did you find your way here?
So, like too many of us, I've had some experiences with intolerance. Unlike many of us, and for me, it wasn't my books being banned. It was me personally being censored in person in front of an audience, essentially. I went to Georgia last August to speak at schools, as I've done hundreds of times around the world. And it was 3 days, 3 schools, 3 talks a day. And in my story, the Batman story that you mentioned, which is a true story, I mentioned that Bill Finger's son, the son of the creator of Batman, co-creator, was gay. And I say that not as a random fact, or certainly not to be provocative, because it's not provocative. It's just a standard fact. I say it because it was instrumental in the research. It was a big turning point. In fact, it led to the big reveal of the story, the big twist. So they didn't like that in Georgia. And it's a quite long story, but the very short version of it is I was asked to leave out the word. And I've been asked before in other parts of the country, in some places that might surprise you, actually. And I've always refused. And it's always been civil, but I've always been able to talk them down and calm them down about it and just trust them that it's part of a story and it's going to be fine. These kids probably know about it already anyway, and they should if they don't. But this was the first time where I just couldn't work my magic, and they were not going to allow me to proceed if I insisted on saying the word. And I said, well, then I don't think we can proceed. And so I walked out, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that was, again, it was August, so the beginning of the school year. And after that, I did a I put together a benefit, an online benefit with about 30 other authors to raise awareness specifically about censorship and banning. And we raised some money for PEN America. And then soon after that, Authors Against Book Bans formed, and I was honored to I mean, it's a weird word to say, right? Because it's not an honor. This is not an honorable situation, but I was honored to join the army, because we really need to be an army on this.
Wow. What a wild ride for you to have to experience that. I'm sorry to hear about it. Michael, how did you come into Authors Against Book Bans?
I'm a queer author, and my books all star gay protagonists. And my debut middle grade novel, The Civil War of Amos Abernathy, has been banned in at least 4 states that I know of, and isn't going to be purchased in several more. And I was a young person who desperately needed to see himself in media, in novels, and I didn't. And I felt, as a young gay boy, very isolated, very lonely, like I was the only person who'd ever felt this way. And for a long time, that did some real damage to my mental health, to my relationships, to my sense of worth. And I don't want any kid to go through that ever again. And so my hope through my stories is that I can let queer protagonists star and celebrate and honor who they are and what they do and what they love. And it breaks my heart that the most banned and challenged books are LGBTQ plus titles, or titles written by Black, Indigenous, and authors of color. And my hope in joining Authors Against Book Bans is that we can come together to remind people of freedom of speech, that we all want to protect and serve children, and that being human, it doesn't look one particular way. And I think that that's what all of our stories do. We come together to build empathy and compassion as a path towards acceptance and love.
Yeah. Wow. Shana, what about you? How did you get in touch with Authors Against Book Bans?
So I just heard it through my network. I think when they were doing an early sign up, I joined in right away. And part of that was because, I grew up, I had some librarians in my family. My aunt Sandy was a librarian who ended up being homebound with MS, but she spent all of her energy doing voter registration, and she worked with League of Women Voters, and she was just a role model for me in the power of freedom of speech, the work of libraries, and the fact that none of us can we can't take for granted what we have, right? And I think particularly when you look like I do, I'm white, I'm married to a man, I'm a mom, right? I need to be out there and saying, I'm standing up with my friends, I'm standing up with my authors of color, I'm standing up for these communities that are being banned more than women are being banned, right? Which is some of the content that they're going for too, of course, because they go for everything. And I think that's the thing. If something is getting banned, it's not about the content, right? I mean, it is about the content, but it's not, the freedom of speech it should not be about content. It should be about the freedom of speech. It should be about upholding the fact that we need these stories, as Michael was talking about, because nobody can say what my kid needs to read, because my kid very well needs Michael's books, needs Marc's books, needs, X, Y, or Z's books. We need these books in libraries, and we need to trust our librarians to get them in the hands of children. And it is not the work of other people who don't specialize in this field. And so I could probably go on for long and long about, we all need the power of story, and it's everybody's job to stand up for that.
Absolutely. And I do want to say to our viewers out there who have just heard all three of you come at this from such different, compelling, different ways, but come to the same conclusion, is to urge them to go to bookbanpetition.us and to sign up and to join the fight against book bans. So thank you all for sharing your journey getting here. I did want to ask the question. So you are three authors that is doing a lot of anti-censorship work. What else do you think authors can bring to the anti-censorship fight going forward? Any of y'all want to take a first stab at that one?
Sure. A lot of our answers will probably overlap, but you definitely have to speak up. And that could be at a school board meeting, that could be in person, if you're with a group where this comes up, which for me, as I've said, has happened too many times. It could be responding to an incident that is happening elsewhere in the country. Whenever I hear of an author, a children's author being banned, well, particularly if it has to do with a visit, like this past spring with Malik Pancholi, who was one of the people who was in the benefit that we did. I hadn't met him before that. He was banned in a pretty high profile situation in a Pennsylvania school. And so, I'm like a robot when I see that happening. I have my certain template ready to go and I fire it off to the superintendent and the principal and all the parties that I can reach, and almost never get a response, which is really not the point, because it's not about me, but just to know that there are people watching and that this doesn't bode well. And I'm not inflammatory. I'm not looking to start a fight. I'm trying to put on my adult pants and be civil about it and speak to them with the respect, giving them the I know this is a loaded term these days, but the benefit of the doubt that they are at least open to having a conversation about it. I have talked with authors who don't like to insert themselves in these situations. They don't like to go to places that are historically intolerant because they're against that. And I said, well, I'm against it too, but the only way that our voices will be heard is if we're right there, and you can't ignore it. Mm-hmm. You have to insert yourself. So there's a lot of different avenues, whatever your comfort level is. If you're not the type of person to go to a school board meeting, maybe you would be comfortable writing an email or even just signing a petition. There's no shortage of opportunities to raise objections and I shouldn't say that, to speak your truth.
Mm-hmm. Such an important part of community too, is showing up and showing that, we are paying attention to what you're doing and it's not going to get unnoticed. So thank you. Any, Shana or Michael?
Something I've recently started doing and I want to do more of is not only just sharing my stories, my novels, but also the stories surrounding my stories. And I think one of the best things that people who have questions about censorship or book banning, or who are wondering like, well, what about this particular book, is to talk about the impact that our books are having on readers. And I've been really fortunate. I've gotten quite a few notes from readers, young readers, parents, teachers, librarians, guardians, about what my work means to them or to the young people in their lives. And I've kept those letters and those notes and those emails as closely guarded treasures. And it dawned on me the other day that that's a really great tool that I have to help show other people what is happening when they read a story. And so I'm pulling out a lot of personal information from these bits of fan mail, but the heart, the piece that matters is there. And I'm hoping that might open a few more eyes and just help people see the power of the written word.
Yeah, absolutely. Shana.
Yeah. So whenever possible, I try to talk about the power of story, like Michael is saying, and also that this is not about making children read books that their parents are opposed to, right? Parents always have the right, I'm a parent, I always have the right to know what my kids are reading and to say no. I don't personally, because I talk to my kids about what they're reading, and that's just not, I'm aware. I guess actually my first book, I didn't let my older daughter read right away because it was a 14+ YA and it came out when she was 12. And I said, you're going to like that better when you're older. And, we'll talk about it when you read it, which we did when she read it when she was like 15. So this is not about parent, the sort of parents' rights thing at all. Parents always have the right to, they just don't have the right to keep books from my kids.
Exactly.
That's what they don't have the right to do. And, I was at a school board meeting recently and somebody was reading a passage from Ellen Hopkins' Crank as though it were pornography. That book is not, I mean, again, it's not about the content. This is about control. This is about other things. And when we stand up for the freedom to read, we're standing up for elemental freedoms that the majority of Americans agree on, actually. And I think that is something that we can say to our friends and neighbors, and that we can say, this is a foundational American value, and this is what I'm standing up for. And most of us support librarians, and most of us support access to books and stories. And and it's because stories change our lives, because stories matter to us. Tell me about a story that matters to you. Let's have that conversation, because I love books and I get fired up about this.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And then, so through your involvement, let's keep going with it, through your involvement with Authors Against Book Bans, what do you hope that readers will come to understand about libraries and free speech and reading and all of those things? Shana, do you want to keep going?
I guess I can keep going. I think I want people to see that, we are this one big community, that writers have been fed by libraries, been fed by our community, been fed by our stories, and that we are part of that conversation that's giving back. And we're here to uphold each other and to uphold voices that haven't been held up, that have been historically pushed back, and that we need to stand together and say, no, we're not going to let this happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're all going to keep hitting the story nail on the head. What I try to do is use story to illustrate how critical this issue is. And as I've said already numerous times in this short talk, I've had plenty of examples in my school visits. This is my favorite. So it was I believe it was Wisconsin, and I was there for multiple days. So word was spreading that this guy says gay. And I went to one school, and I didn't know any of these principals or any of these. I'd never been to any of these schools. And I went into one of the schools, and after the previous school, the principal had basically chastised me after the talk, saying it was inappropriate to say that. And then they all have the same line. They say, it's not about what I believe. And it has to be about your role as an educator is to believe in equality and equity, and that is part of what you should be proselytizing. So at the school that I went to after that school, where the principal was not happy with me, the principal came up to me, and to her credit, I could see that she was nervous. And to her credit, and by the way, we're already in front of the kids, and they always do this. They wait till I'm standing in front of the kids. And she said, we're looking forward to a great program. I did hear from a principal elsewhere in the district, and we have concern about you saying gay. And I told her that I've done it many times, and no one's imploded, and the ground is not ripped apart, and flames have not come. Everybody survives. And she said she wants to build tolerance in her community, but it has to be a slow process. And I said, I would disagree with that. I don't think there's time to be slow here. And then she said, my daughter is gay, and she's an adult now. And I said, well, did your daughter grow up in this community? And she said, yes. And I said, do you think that she felt she had an outlet to discuss this when she was young? And she said, probably not. Mm-hmm. And I said, then I'm going to ask again if you'll take a leap of faith with me. And she did, to her great credit. So I spoke. I said gay one time, 55 minutes into an hour-long appearance. And then I did Q&A firsthand. And I don't know, 300 kids, I don't know anybody. I just call on them randomly. First boy I called on, he said two things. First, I have two moms. And then the second thing was something about Batman, which doesn't matter here. And so because of that, after they filed out, I went up to the principal, and both of us were trying to hold back the tears, because now, and when he said that he has two moms, there was no negative reaction from the crowd whatsoever, not even a snicker. And so this boy probably, I don't know, I'm assuming he probably doesn't talk about it much, but now he feels like he can. And that story, I hope would melt an icy heart, or certain icy hearts, at least because it's a child at the center of it. When you see that it does matter to young people. If I go in as an author, they're just going to see me as an author, as a proselytizer, as whatever, all these ugly other words that they use for people that believe in equity and believe in discussing LGBTQ. But if you say this is how it affected a child, it's harder to attack that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad that situation worked out, and she did listen, and she came around. Look what happened. Good stuff. Yeah.
I give her huge props.
Good. Yeah, me too. Michael, what about you?
Yeah, and I really loved that story you shared, Mark, and I appreciate you fighting the good fight, because we want all kids to feel seen. We want all kids to grow in empathy. And in sharing these stories about a particular marginalized identity, it's not about just that one group or community feeling seen. It's about also opening the eyes of other people to what life is like for somebody else. That is the only way that we move forward. And, Mark, as I was listening to, I was thinking about how kids are so far ahead of so many adults, and they are so ready and receptive to story and to the stories of people who don't look or sound or feel like them. And they want information, they're hungry for it, and their hearts are open. And I want to make sure that, in our work with Authors Against Book Bans, that we are giving them access, and that access to books isn't dependent on the state in which you live. Children don't have a choice where they live. They live where their parents or guardians are. And our mission is to ensure that there is that equity across the nation. And we're going to keep fighting for it, and we're going to keep sharing all of the good that comes from standing up for freedom of speech and talking about this beautiful, complex world of humans that we have. And so I think the more that we share these positive stories, the more that we continue to write our books, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. You all have shared such beautiful stories tonight that really reflect the power of, honesty and getting out there and just writing and books in general. I do want to take another moment just to remind our listeners that our viewers tonight that they can donate. Everylibrary.org/2024 is a great place to start. Clearly, this battle is not just going to be done by humans. It also takes money. And so we appreciate our viewers tuning in there. And this is going by, y'all, we are speeding through here because we're having such a good time. I do want to give you each a chance to talk a little bit about what you're working on next, what we can expect from you. Michael, do you want to go first?
Sure. I can't say too much about what's coming up next, but I'm working on several middle grade projects, some upper fantasy middle grade, and I've got a lower middle grade that I'm also exploring, and really, really excited about all the things to come. So stay tuned.
Yes, we will. Mark, what about you? What's coming up?
So similarly, I got some good news a couple of weeks ago that I can't yet announce, but it's a funny picture book that I have been passionate about for a while and just finally found the right fit. And I've started a novel, which is a bit of a ghost story, and another nonfiction picture book, which will be one family's experience during the Vietnam War, but only over the course of one day, because something very significant happened that one day.
Okay, very cool. And Shana, what about you? Do you also have a secret project that you can tease us with?
But I am working on promoting the catalog of burnt objects, which is coming out in March, and is a book of my heart. It's based on or inspired by the destruction of my hometown of Paradise, California in the campfire of 2018. So that one is was a one I cried a lot when I wrote, and maybe people will cry when they read. And then I have a I think more fun kind of a ghost story maybe that I'm tinkering on in the meantime. So.
Awesome. Y'all, this has been a delight. I want to thank each of you for joining us tonight. Again, also Authors Against Book Bans for bringing us together, all of the wonderful things they do. And this is only night 2 of Every Library Book Ban Live this week. So we're going until Friday. You can find out more about the events at everylibrary.org/ELBB24. And I wish you all a wonderful Monday, and I'll check in with you later. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.